if you do have a W-2, I built this while I was at a corporate gig. So like during lunchtime, I'd be calling contractors, in the morning. Chicago's 2 hours ahead. So I'd be, you know, talking to the contractors again to see what the scope is for the work, or helping them buy materials, like approving it through Home Depot. Then you're gonna have to do like the bank account statement. So there's a lot of little things that add up in this line of work.
Hey guys, welcome back to Ask Me How I Know. I am so glad that you are here. And once again, we have an amazing guest with us today. And I am excited because a lot of people are facing some challenges because of the pandemic. And this is your guy to help you solve to provide a lot of solutions. So Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolute pleasure to be here, Julie. Really excited to hopefully impart a little bit of wisdom so that people can learn from my shortcomings and be inspired to build their own business one day in the real estate sector.
Well, when you say shortcomings, I'm kind of like, yeah, whatever, Kevin. You're a rock star. You're a very humble, modest rock star. And so I appreciate that you're willing to share some of the things that you've overcome. Can you share a little bit about what it is that you are doing with your company, Atlas?
Yep.
Altus. Sorry, not Atlas, Altus.
No problem. People mix that up all the time, especially when you first read it over. But Altus, it means like, higher, profound, kind of in the cloud. So Altus Investment Group, I run a vertically integrated investment firm where it's all out of state. I run it from Los Angeles, businesses out of Chicago and the suburbs, and we have property management in-house, general contracting in-house, and investments in-house. So we take properties that are old, dilapidated, we renovate them, we place tenants inside of them, and then we sell it as a rental investment for clients out of state who are looking for cash flow, passive cash flow.
So is it more of a turnkey operation, just to clarify, for investors?
Yep. Yeah. So another use or word that people call is like turnkey. And a lot of times people throw that around. We are full turnkey. So we actually provide all the services, under our umbrella.
So what makes you so unique? Wait, I just have to say, what a great conversation starter, because you have that mix up with the company name, Atlas and Altus. And
Yeah.
So you automatically get to talk about the heart and soul of your company and everything. I love it.
Yeah, definitely.
You could.
I mean, it was like a Latin word, and I was like, okay, let me just go through the dictionary over here to find something good. And Altus really, hit home for me, because like thinking a little bit deeper about life and what the meaning is, and finding purpose in this world is something that I really value. So that word is also in the A's in the dictionary. So if you're looking up contractor lists or looking up names of companies, it's as well.
We could call it AA Altus, right?
I should have done that. That would have been at the very beginning, first person people call whenever they need something.
Right, exactly. It's a good strategy, but it's working really well for you. So when we're going back to Altus and what it is that you're producing, let's go ahead and just talk about the business component for investors, and just offering them a full service. Now, a lot of times people are like, oh, great, I can just buy this Midwest property over here and just just place my money in. It's now mine, that single family house.
Yep.
What is it that's making your company just a little different from, hey, realtor, here you go?
Yeah. So the beauty about being in real estate, there's a lot of space where you can kind of find your home. And, a lot of friends of mine, as well as myself, provide products where people can collect on that monthly or quarterly income and not have to do any of the legwork that you traditionally have to learn yourself in real estate. Real estate and business in general is a lot of problem solving. So for the most part, I'm answering calls and I'm solving a problem, and it costs money. But with turnkey providers or passive type investments that you purchase, you can pretty much expedite some of your learning. You reduce your returns a little bit, but you're able to earn without spending your valuable time, and you can focus that on what you want to do best. One of the things that sets us apart at Altus Investment Group is we actually specialize in lower income and affordable housing rentals, which, especially in today's day and age, with the eviction moratoriums and the possible foreclosures, all these forbearances, having a program that's paid by the government is really, really reassuring, because even if that particular individual loses their job, the the government will pick up the bill for the majority of their rental income. So that's one of the big selling points. And then of course we actually own a property management company that I have partners with, then we run, and then we also have in-house general contractors. So a lot of the cost is as low as it can be for the rehabs, and then a lot of the control over what the property looks like and how it's functioning is also under our control.
I really like that you have the general contractors, in-house, because so often, the PM, the property manager, is picking up a phone and calling a third party, and then they get hit with this, I mean, the owners are getting hit, the investors, with this big fat ticket. So
It's a
that's a
difficult business to be in, and I honor anybody who's a general contractor and a property manager. They're both challenging businesses that don't get a lot of the glamour that you would from like a real estate investment side, but are all critical components to having the investment be successful. Reducing the costs on the general contracting side and making sure the quality is good, so that you don't have long-term repair issues or maintenance issues. And then on the management side, to really make sure that the property is protected over the long term, as opposed to kind of neglected and at the will of the residents who are living there.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, we don't want to have chronic general contractor syndrome. Like, you keep calling for different problems.
Yeah, it can get a little expensive and it can get tiring as well. And it's hard, especially when you're working on these remote investments that pencil a little bit better than maybe in some of the coastal markets that are higher or lower cap rates or higher price points.
Yeah, big time. I can't wait to get into the remote element, but I have another question about your location and the type of property that
Okay.
you are rehabbing, because there are some other people I've interviewed and other people in our multifamily niche and just real estate in general who have a similar heart as yours, and that is going in and rehabbing some areas that might be a little rough around the edges and improving them. And I just love that mission so much. So um, can you tell us a little bit about more about that and maybe some of the pros and cons of it?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually invest in the suburbs of Chicago. And Chicago's a massive city. There are definitely some rough patches there and a lot of stigma around certain areas. And I've driven through those areas, and I wouldn't even take a house for free in some of those places. You wouldn't be able to rent it. You'd be paying property taxes, and you'd probably have to deal with all kinds of shenanigans going on. But I'm a value investor. I like to find products that are need room for improvement. So typically we'll go in, we'll do a pretty heavy rehab of electrical, plumbing, HVAC, roof, all new floors, kitchen, bath. We do a very deep rehab on the property to minimize the amount of long-term repairs needed. And by doing that, buying at a discount and rehabbing it, we're able to restore it to the original quality, or a quality that was similar to when it was first brand new, and hopefully attract really strong tenants that'll want to live there for the long term. So we call them residents. Ideally, they're
Yeah.
staying there for longer than 2 years, because vacancy is one of your major expenses on any type of rental. So keeping people for a long time and having them live in a home that they really enjoy is an important part of the business.
That's it. Just, I absolutely love that. And one of the things that I love about real estate in general is that we get to win. Everybody, my whole thing is like, everybody can win. Like,
Yep,
the investors win, the communities win, and the residents win. But by doing what you're doing, I mean, the communities really win, because when there's a house, it can go either way. It's like, okay, well, this house is improving, and I was just out in Huntsville looking at a area that's gentrifying, and it's like, how it is. Like, every third house is like under construction, having a facelift,
for sure.
and the whole area is coming up, and the opposite can happen. So I just love that you're part of that, like, rising gentrification and making something come back to life.
You have to help as much as possible, and to provide a really strong home for somebody where it completely lightens up the energy and the vibe there, helps the spirit of those residents in a lot of cases. You can't help them with everything. I mean, unfortunately, we everybody has the same amount of time every single day, but you can help in the ways that we are best skilled at.
That's right. Well, let's go ahead and jump over into this other part that there's so many parts of what you do that I'm just so like I'm so curious about.
For
But
sure.
let's go over to running a remote business. Now, I can't recall, we spoke a while back, and I can't recall if you moved from Chicago and you like flew down south to LA, to escape icy cold winters. Tell us about how did you even get started with working remotely?
Yeah, so I'm an LA kid, born and raised. My parents are from Venice, California, so I've been part of the LA West Side for forever. But my friend 8 years ago approached me asking if I wanted to flip houses in Chicago back in 2012. So me being the young go getter that I was at that time, I was like, hey, if the numbers make sense, let's go for it. So we flipped a couple houses out there. It's a really difficult business to flip remotely, especially when you're managing crews directly underneath you, especially in a town where um, you can get a little bit of a fast talker. So people who talk a good game, but maybe don't, you know, they don't produce the work that they say they're going to do, or they don't work like they say they're actually going to work. So we kind of were a little bit of a grind in that business for about a year and a half, 2 years. And then I switched over to rental properties in 2015. So first I bought Turnkey rentals, Turnkey, I'll put that in air quotes.
Okay.
And it was more of like a lipstick on a pig type situation where like, oh wow, fresh paint, new doors, like a kitchen, new tile. But come to find, that was like one of the most challenging houses we had, where there's a lot of deferred maintenance items behind the walls. So collapsed sewer line, termites, like massive amount of termites that popped up eventually at some point. So we had to do a lot of additional renovations on that, and that kind of frustrated me enough where I'm like, okay, I'm going to find my own crews. And then that's a whole another journey in itself to find good people that you can trust across the country that, you know, have a good heart, are willing to work hard at a fair price.
So how do you even go about finding those people? I mean, was it just a matter of just going through and just, okay, that one doesn't work, that one doesn't work. Yes, winner. Like how does that actually work?
Yeah. So the ultimate solution was referrals. So, find people of the providers that you work with. So real estate agents maybe know a lot of contractors or investors who are working on projects. Um, Other service providers, so like HVAC people, plumbers. So, a lot of the city villages, they'll have like contractor lists that you can call down and, at least get bids from them to see if they're reasonable. We ultimately ended up, my main contractors that I have now, one was a referral, and I worked with his general contractor, but then he ended up moving. So then I inherited his crew, which is really awesome.
That
And
worked out
then
well.
it did. So I've been working with him for about, 4 years now. And then another crew I picked up, and it was a referral from a real estate agent. But in between there, I've gone through a lot of crews, like 5 or 6 crews, and I've gone through plenty of bad people, and I've gone through mediocre people. But ultimately, it's a people game. Real estate's people, and business is people. Life is people.
Right. I feel like you're a little bit like Goldilocks, just like sampling the porridge, sampling the chairs. Like,
Yeah.
really?
I mean, I'm definitely one of those individuals who like I'll try and I'll keep pushing forward and persevere through it, learn through the mistakes, but ultimately you're just trying to continue to build up a better and better team over time.
Right. And it sounds like it does take time, but you can definitely, someone can arrive and they can get there.
Yeah, so it does take time to build it the way that we did, because we took in a lot of elements in house. So general contracting and property management at the same time. It's like two different individual businesses, plus trying to like raise capital for investors. So it's like three types of businesses in one. I probably could have simplified things, which is what I'd recommend for everybody out there who's trying to jump into real estate. Like, start off slow, like test the market, be okay with making a little bit less and find people that you trust in that market. And then if you want to truly turn into a business, like build it up, strategically and simply.
That's really sound strong advice. So, what are some of the potholes that could have really just crushed this from the very beginning that you could help some people just kind of scoot around? Because I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of people, jockeying into this remote business model.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say one thing that you can't get around is like putting in the work. So it's time, and you have to build relationships and trust with people. So, um, once again, if you find those referrals, make sure you have as much, FaceTime with them or phone time to like really know that they're a good alignment with who you are and somebody that you want to work with. Because if you're going to have this collaboration, you're going to be working with them for a while. Also, make sure you find a market where you feel comfortable in the value that you're creating out there. So, in Chicago, we were buying houses for 30, 40, 50,000 and putting 40 into it and then renting it for 1,600 to like 2,000. So those types of returns are pretty incredible. The prices have crept up a little bit, but we're still getting the same kind of rents that we're looking for. And, um, you know, I would say that make sure you just nurture those relationships is really critical, and then be prepared to put in some extra work. So if you do have a W-2, I built this while I was at a corporate gig. So like during lunchtime, I'd be calling contractors, in the morning. Chicago's 2 hours ahead. So I'd be, you know, talking to the contractors again to see what the scope is for the work, or helping them buy materials, like approving it through Home Depot. Then you're gonna have to do like the bank account statement. So there's a lot of little things that add up in this line of work.
So basically, for a while, your miracle morning was being on the phone with people in Chicago.
Yeah, my miracle morning was all over the place because like I'd get phone calls like at 4 a.m. when the contractor was out there at 6 a.m. or yeah. So I've gone through a fair share of stories, and uh, you also have to change your mindset where a lot of it's like, hey, I'm solving problems, and these problems you can't get frustrated about. It's anytime you're working with something old or a new investment, any type of investment, like you're going to encounter challenges, and it's really shifting like, okay, how do we solve this challenge as efficiently and as cheaply as possible?
I love that. I always look at it also as a puzzle. I enjoy doing puzzles. I do them like once a year, once every 3 years. But it's like you're just figuring out what works. Like,
100%. 100%.
yeah, yeah. Just another way to say the exact same thing. So
Yeah.
basically,
And
I'm being redundant.
no, no, no. I mean, I also, semantics are, how would you say it? There's a lot of words you can use in the language they use that's very powerful to change the same situation into something else. So I could say like, man, like I'm constantly dealing with problems and they cost me a lot of money, and a bunch of headaches out there, and then that changes your energy altogether versus like, hey,
Oh.
we're going through some little puzzles over here, little fun thought experiments to
But it does, it completely shifts just on that note on mindset. You and I are in alignment on that. It shifts how you're going to approach it, and that positive demeanor just helps you find that solution so much faster. So it's
Yep.
just how the brain works. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, even though like I'm a very positive person, like I've still had to go through some of these lessons as well with my one of my main crew out there. He only speaks Spanish. I speak Spanish, but he speaks like Honduran Spanish, and he has a little bit of a hearing issue. So at times I get frustrated, even though his work is really good. I may not be able to communicate as effectively to him, and you know, people need that positive encouragement that they're doing a great job, and they don't want to feel like, hey, I'm constantly being hounded even though I'm working so hard. So there's a lot of subtleties in working with people that you just learn over time. And mindset is a really critical aspect of being successful in life.
You said something just now that is, I wish more people, I hope everyone just hears this, and that's why I'm drawing attention to it. But you said like everybody needs encouragement, and I feel like during this period in our of history right now, there's just, we could really do well to have more people going around and encouraging and just saying, "Wow, that's good job over there."
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it requires the same amount of energy to be positive or negative. But the effects of being negative will have a little bit more of a lingering effect in people. And I mean, you don't want to be like, I'm optimistic generally, but I would like to say like I'm a realist, a real
Yeah.
optimistic individual. And I see more of a benefit in life of just being like, hey, on the glass half full type side versus, you know, a situation is what it is, but you might as well try and see it in the best light possible. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you're just gonna get down on yourself too much.
Yeah. And bring everybody else around you down. It's crazy. Um, I'm going to pause for a second. There was a direction I was
I know.
thinking about your business.
We were trying. talking a little bit about like the work remote experience. I don't know if you want to dive more into that, but it's kind
Yeah,
of
I do. And I was like, there was a question I wanted to ask. I had to go about that. And I sometimes I'll just kind of at least like if there's something I know I want to ask, I'm like, this is fun because I edit. I can like I'll edit this out. Don't worry.
no problem. It's all conversation, so it's all good.
Actually, it would be really funny to leave it in sometime. Maybe I should.
I don't. I mean, it brings a little bit more of a human element to it, so maybe it
Right.
doesn't apply for all those listeners out there who are.
Right, exactly. This is how the behind the scenes, how this really works. Well, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about that working remotely. I know the question I was going to ask you now. Thank you for
Okay,
your patience.
go for it.
The question was, how much time should somebody who is just beginning a remote business, how much time do you think they should allot for travel? Did you
Mm,
have to go out to Chicago often, or whatever market somebody is investing in? How many trips did you need to make? What can people budget for, time wise, expense wise?
yeah. So when I first started the business, I was traveling out for a weekend. So I'd fly out like a Friday evening and then come back Sunday afternoon, maybe once or twice a month. And I was planning to go out twice a month. So I quit my corporate job back in September of last year. It's been a little over a year, which is
Congratulations.
thank you, thank you. It was a lot of work kind of in between, but I was planning to travel more regularly, especially since my business is a little bit more technical, having different components to it. And you can work remote. Like the best situation is if you can truly be in that market and then branch off later and become remote because your whole style and energy and way you lead is a lot easier to show in person. But when you build remote, you have to have a little bit more patience on how you build that. So um, the better the people you can find on your team, the more you're going to be able to offload some of those responsibilities. And it's really about just encouraging them, empowering them, and letting them know how valuable they are, with the delicate balance of like, what makes sense financially. So um, I would say like you probably want to travel out there at least once a month. And then if you find like A plus players, depending on what you're trying to do, you can travel out there less frequently. And it also depends on how in tune they are with technology, because I mean, a lot of general contractors are on the old school side. So, they're not going to be sophisticated with their phones or software like Slack and Asana and email management. They're not going to have that sophistication. So it really just comes down to um, who you find, what their role is, and how much you can actually offload to them in a way where it's still going to stay productive.
That's a really there's a lot there, and a lot to when we're talking about communication, it is different between the contractors and even a property management group. I mean, you could be using Slack or Asana with your PM, and they're happy to use that more often than not. So, but you're right, your GC is like,
Yeah, I mean that's not. It's everybody's mind works a little bit differently. So some people feel certain roles better. Some people are not technologically advanced, but you want to really try and push technology as much as possible. There's a lot of great tools out there. For instance, like we used Simply Safe security systems to monitor one of our contractors that we were testing out to see like, hey, we're putting this security system in to like protect the property, but we're actually checking to see like when you go into the property and when you leave the property, you turn off the sensor. So that allowed us to like really keep track of like, hey, you're going to the job late these days, or you're leaving early these days, or you didn't come in this day, and then
did
that
you actually call him out on that?
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
And
like,
it was towards the tail end of it because we're trying to wrap up that project. And, you want to be very delicate with confronting a contractor like mid project because last thing you want to do is
oh
like,
my gosh,
um,
upset them and then they
yeah,
quit. This is like the equivalent for a girl getting her hair done. Like, you don't upset your hairdresser in the middle of a color or cut. Come on.
great analogy, great analogy. Yeah, you don't want somebody else coming in halfway on that project and like trying to fill in colors on one side versus another. That's a tricky business. So
Right.
contractors, you have to tiptoe around them, encourage them enough, never overpay them past what they've done, because a lot of times once again it comes down to mindset. There are a lot of phenomenal people out there, a lot of great contractors, but sometimes the sophistication may not be there, and they may be a little bit short-sighted versus the long term. If I do good work and bring in more business, then I'll get more business.
That's a very gracious way of putting, they might just want to take your money and run. I mean,
Yeah,
you're so
yeah.
gracious and delicate. I appreciate it.
I've I've had one situation like that, and I mean, you know, you never want that to happen. And it was fortunately a very little amount of money, but I've also had a business partner that lost a decent amount of money that way. And you can sense red flags on people before that shows up. So typically you want to cut those ties before it becomes a problem. And don't be afraid to fire a contractor. I mean, that being said, like if they're really a pain to deal with and they're constantly just a burden, it's okay to cut ties and just, put pause on the project.
That is tough to do.
Yeah.
Have you done that?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you may pay a little bit more to get the other person upstarted, but
Right.
it's better than dealing with the major headaches of like somebody who's just constantly a frustration to work with, and who may not have definitely doesn't have your best interest in heart, where it's like, okay, I'm constantly doubting if the work's being done correctly. And
Right.
there's instances where it's best to cut your ties. So situation, a lot of this is situational.
Okay, since you have had experience with this, and trust me, you and I know you know people, you've done this, and I know people that should do this. Cut some ties with a GC. In my case, I know people that need to cut ties with some PMs.
Yeah.
So how did you go about do that? What advice would you give for, when you see the red flag, when you see XYZ, what's the advice on how to manage it?
Number one, don't let that person know that you're about to cut ties. But then start sourcing other people and start getting referrals. So like really get all your backups lined up as quickly as possible, and start that vetting and courting process to let them know, that you're interested in building a relationship with them long term. And that's the really important part that I always emphasize. Like, hey, I'm not a standard client. Like, I'm trying to bring you consistent business, and it'll make your job easier because if you have predictability, you can expand off of this. And referrals are the best way. If you can get referrals, that's phenomenal. Call any person that you know who's like you've interacted with in that real estate space, or even friends who are in that space, to see if they can get you like a warm contact. And that warm contact may not be the right person, but maybe they have a referral that they can get you to.
So when you have that warm contact, and then you say, "Hey, so I have this job I need you to bid out, but we need to do this on the down low." Like, how do you go about getting even a bid on something when you have someone else working on
I mean, getting
it?
somebody else working on that's pretty tough. Like, you probably have to build them off the job, but like you at least want to have a couple people lined up. Like, hey,
Okay.
you have a job coming up. Um, it's going to come up in about a week or so. And then you just kind of line them up after, and you cut the other person off type situation. Like, hey, this isn't working out for me. I appreciate what you've done. I'm sure your style works with other people, but I'd like to kind of move on and put a halt on this job. It's no longer working for either one of us, and I'm sure you can sense the same thing. So I'm really cordial and nice about things.
You are, and I think I would be the same way. But I'm marveling. That is such again a gracious way of going about it.
Yeah, and I mean, I look at it as like relationships. Like maybe I'll circle back on this contractor at some point, but then tiptoe him into projects. So like, hey, you can't do a full rehab, but maybe you can do some maintenance work on something, or so um, there are some people that you just don't want anything to do with, but then there's some like maybe like like he's okay. So, but you typically try and stay away and like move on to the a better service provider.
There's a lot of truth to that. I actually circled back. Brief story here. I circled back to a contractor who had done a remodel for us before, and I was a little bit frustrated with the process, but the work was exceptional. And then we came up with another remodel project. And we both looked at each other and said, we both know how we are, but we acknowledged it because we both knew that we're both great people. It's like, okay, we pay on time and you produce great work, and
Yep.
sometimes you have to iron out that relationship. But I'm glad I didn't burn bridges with him, because he
Sure.
surely helped out and got great work done.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, there's all kinds of stories like that. Ideally, you're locking in like your A players, and you keep them consistently busy. That's something that I've done. Like, hey, I found a great people, so I'll always bring them projects and leave, even overlapping projects, so that they can't lose their attention on other jobs.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's something that a little bit of a luxury that comes with time once you're getting a flow of things. And I mean, there are a lot of variables that come into play for like truly starting your remote business. I would say the easiest recommendation is once you kind of get your foot in the door. Like, I really like the passive model, and I preach the passive model to a lot of my investors. Like, hey, maybe you want to become an active investor, but realize there's a lot of work. You can kind of learn from somebody else without having to do and deal with all the headaches. So like, hey, do I like what it's like to get rental property income, or do I like what it's like to get random phone calls, at various times about certain repair issues, usually related to plumbing. um, and that kind of gets you a taste or feel for like, hey, maybe I'm good with just trusting a vetted investment group that has a great track record and letting them grow my money. And then some people are a lot more hands on. We're like, hey, no, I want to do this myself. Like I'm all in. So you can kind of find your speed and pace in this game, and it's okay to tread slowly. But then once you find a lot of traction on what you want to do, then jump in.
That's great advice. And sometimes some people jump in and they might need to slow down a little bit
Yep.
and regain some perspective. We've spent a lot of time talking about the general contractor portion of your business and how you run that. And we don't want to neglect the property management side of what you
Definitely.
do. And of course, there's the investment side, and we've touched on that a little bit. But let's talk about how you have that in house, and I'll let you extrapolate.
For sure. I mean, that's like a major value component for a lot of people, where you can see how the house is operating. We pretty much know these houses very intimately because we've restored them, and then we place the tenants inside of it. So who we put inside the house is really important, especially in like lower affordable housing, lower income housing, and affordable housing. There's a lot of storylines that go on to find a good tenant. So we do a pretty deep screening, but also dig deeper into who the person is and why they're in this current economic state. And you do have a lot of people that are taking advantage of the system, but you have a lot of people that just need help and assistance. And they're unfortunately, their financial situation struggled because of like health issues, or too many people in their family, too many children, and or a combination of these reasons where they can't get a good flow in life and they need some assistance. So having a better grasp on tenant screening, having a better grasp on like how much the repairs are going to cost, seeing how the property is kind of weathering the weather in Chicago,
Right.
time, it just gives us more touches on the property and more touches with the tenant, so that we can feel confident that the property is performing long term.
Nice. And with having that in-house, I mean, how have you vetted and built up the property management side of things?
Yeah, so property management is very process oriented. So a lot of the same steps over and over again. And you want to use software as much as you can. So we are using like a third party property management software. We have central communication through Slack. We put assignments through our property management software, but also through Asana. And the goal is just to have it be as systemized as possible. And easier said than done. I mean, implementing the systems can be a little bit tricky, and then getting everybody on board to use the systems can also be challenging. But fortunately, I have like some pretty good support in our operations manager, Tamika, and we're looking to hire an additional assistant for her right now. So things are going well on that front, but it's definitely it's not as glamorous as a business. It's not a very glamorous business. Like it's really for control, pretty much.
Right. That's fantastic. And let's go ahead and touch now more on the investment side of things. Like, I'll leave that wide open. You can take it whichever way you want to go. Not, I'll probably ask you a few questions.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, that's kind of where everything comes together. Ultimately, like I acquired a lot of properties into my personal portfolio, and then from there it expanded. Like, hey, how do we grow this to a point where there's consistent business so that it can employ people, and that's where bringing in an investment model makes sense. Where hey, we produce these houses that are income based investments. So we're very big on cash flow. That's pretty much what I believe in. You want to be able to add value, have a property that brings consistent cash flow, and make sure it produces that cash flow over the long term. So typically, our clients are buying properties anywhere from the 80,000 on the low side to about 175,000, and then the rents are anywhere from like 1,400 up to 2,300 in rents, depending on like the market. So our clients a lot of times are getting like an 8 to 12 cap. Earlier this year is closer to a 12 cap. With the way things are and the residential market spiking up and heating up here in over the past months into October, cap rates are closer to 10, 9 to 10, and but then a lot of people recommend financing as well. If you do smart financing and leverage correctly, the cash flow is much greater than all the debt and expenses that you'd pay. So you can leverage your money, get a higher return on that money you invested, and save the rest for whatever you like to.
Yeah. I won't lie. I love multifamily and I love apartments and everything. But every time I like when you and I spoke a few months ago, I'm like, golly, Kevin, this is sounding really good.
Yeah, pros and cons. I mean, I would say like to build up the business I have now is a lot of work. Once it's kind of rolling, it's much easier. Multifamily, I'm a big believer as well because you get multiple tenants, and you have like higher level professional contractors as well as property management companies in there. A little bit bigger risk, a little bit. The reward can kind of be variable. Pros and cons. Pros and cons.
Pros and cons. Yeah, but as a passive investor, that's a everyone can be expanding. And I always tell the listeners, I mean, every person that is on this show is somebody that if they resonate with you, then you give them a call, you reach out to them and you say, wow, I want to learn more, because those conversations have to take place before you can participate. So you want to make sure that you make that phone call, that you send that email so that you can participate with people like Kevin. So maybe somebody's listening right now and they're thinking, I don't know so much, Julie, about the multifamily space, but Kevin's over here with these awesome houses with this great cash flow. I love it.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, single family homes are the easiest to understand. A lot of people own them or rented a house, and there's a lot of great tax benefits that you get to write off directly by owning it yourself. So there's a lot of benefits in real estate in general. Like I'm just a proponent that people invest and
Yes.
educate themselves and work with people that you enjoy being with. That's important.
This is so true. We're getting into saltwater aquarium life. We're going to be having a coral reef in our house soon.
Okay,
Right.
nice.
It's a process, it's a slow process. But the reason I'm bringing this up is that we were speaking with someone on the topic over the weekend, and they said, once you have one tank, you'll probably end up with multiple tanks. That's just how this hobby goes. So it's like that with real estate. It's like, oh, well, I have this over here and then I have this over there.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of you know friends and colleagues in this space, like they'll accumulate assets, they'll jump into different asset classes, and then the real estate has shown a lot of success for them, and they may not have reached that kind of fulfillment. So they'll try and figure out like how to contribute and give back. And I've always been of the standpoint like how do you help out as many people throughout the entire process, like all the time. And real estate is one of those places where you can help educate people, open up their eyes to like the power of it, but also give a nice alternative investment versus the stock market, which it's done great over time, but it's also all over the place at times. So a lot of
I
people,
always I always think, where is it going to be when I go to retire? Am I
yeah.
going to be retired? Like it's like throwing the dice on the craps table. Like where is it going to land? I don't know.
If you set and forget it, hopefully your advisors on the stock market side aren't hitting you with too many fees and are doing right by you. So
Definitely. Kevin, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. Are there any other last gems that you would like to leave the audience?
yeah, yeah. So one thing that's really been helpful for me is just being authentic. And I love that message of trying to be who you are and not trying to fake being somebody else. Because if you're just yourself and you're in alignment with who you are, you'll attract the people that you want to work with. You'll attract the people that want to work with you. And it's just so much easier to live life like that versus trying to pretend to be something you're not. That being said, everybody goes through hardships, and there's constant evolution of like who you are. But that's always been something that's really valuable to me. Just trying to be myself as much as possible.
Ah, preach it. That's something I'm a firm believer in also. And like you said, sometimes you have a setback in life or something, but it's part of that evolution of who you are becoming the next iteration of yourself. Like there's a little bit of struggle, that a little friction that has to take place to get you to the next spot.
And then one last piece of wisdom here: make sure you're constantly like in business, in real estate, in life. It's people, and the more you want to produce, a lot of times you're going to have to resonate with more people. So don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to be foolish or silly or not know something, because everybody is in the shoes that you're at right now at some point. And everybody's in the shoes, and there's plenty of people in the shoes that you want to be in one day in the future. So reach out to people, ask questions, no matter how smart or dumb they may be.
I love it. And that is some great, great wisdom. So if they want to reach out to you, Kevin, they're like, wow, I mean, this sounds like someone I want to work with. And I said it earlier, but I'm going to reiterate it. I mean, Kevin has a great business model, and if that's something that is of interest to you, then that is definitely someone you want to say, Kevin, how do I call you? How do I call you? Do I email you? How do I
Yeah, yeah.
reach you?
So a couple different ways. I come in and out of LinkedIn, but you can find me on LinkedIn at Kevin K Dugan, Dugan, or you can shoot me an email at kdugan, Dugan, at Altus, ALTUSIG.com. My website's altusig.com.
Awesome. So make sure, listeners, that you go and you check out his offerings, what's going on, and if that's something that you're interested in, don't hesitate. You want to get started sooner than later, or you want to add something more to your fish tank, in a sense, to your real estate portfolio sooner than later. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us on Ask Me How I Know.
Awesome. Thank you for the time. It was great chatting with you, and I'll see you soon.
Thanks so much for joining me for another episode of Ask Me How I Know. This episode was brought to you by Three Keys Investments. They are dedicated to helping people like you, you, my awesome listeners, develop passive income and legacy wealth through multifamily investing. Feel free to check out their website, threekeysinvestments.com, to see if there's an offering that will help your portfolio grow and meet all of your needs. If you haven't already rated, reviewed, subscribed, liked, all of those bells and whistles, I would be absolutely honored if you would do that for Ask Me How I Know. Thanks again, and go make it a great